have such sights to show you.
We're Poppin the Scary horror podcast here. I'm your host, Coale, and with me as always, I have my good friend and co-host, Aaron. Aaron, what is going on?
Nothing much.
Whoa.
Getting ready to go to the moon.
Come on the cheat, we are going to the moon!
Yeah, outer space.
Yeah, so
Alien.
you seem pretty pumped about this episode.
Yeah, this is like the first episode where I've actually seen this movie before.
Yeah,
I've seen this movie.
Yeah, it surprised me whenever I mentioned it and we talked afterwards. You're like, yeah, I've seen the movie, and I was like, oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, well, I see,
Yeah.
So I watched it like a decade ago probably, so it's not like I remember that much about it, but it's one of those movies I wouldn't have thought to think of it as a horror movie, but looking back on it, it's definitely got horror elements. It's horrific. It's got a spooky, scary alien and someone trying to survive from it in a dark ship. So yeah.
Was there any circumstance as to what made you watch this film and stuff, since again you didn't really actively seek out horror?
Right. So, and that's what the thing is, I never thought of it as like a horror movie. I liked movies, especially a lot more growing up, and in college I was real into cinema, and so I just tried to watch films that I ought to have watched, that were critically acclaimed. And I think this one probably reaches more of like a critically acclaimed audience than maybe most horror films that might have more of a cult following. And Alien, of course, has a cult following as well, but I think it was probably better critically received. That being said, I've never watched any of the follow-ups. I never watched any of the Alien vs. Predator or any of the sequels, any of that kind of stuff. So I don't know anything about that universe. All I have is the original, what is it, like 79 Ridley Scott Alien. Yeah, I know about that.
That's exactly what it is. With me, it's been kind of like a weird thing, because whenever it would come to horror, you'd see the xenomorph with its like elongated head and everything. But it wasn't one of those things that I was immediately like, oh, that looks cool. I gotta see what that's about. Right. It really wasn't until my friend Randy actually mentioned, hey, have you seen the first Alien? You ought to see it. And I'm like, oh, okay. And I borrowed his collection of it, and it's one of those things that from there I watched 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then that's pretty much it. I did watch Prometheus, which is in the same universe, as for the other films like Alien vs. Predator, I hadn't seen it either. But that was my overall experience. So whenever it comes to space in general, it's always kind of like a weird thing with me. It's very hit or miss on whether I like it a ton or not. Right. Typically, I never like, oh no, I hate anything in space. It's not necessarily that. It's just never been one of those things that I've been very much attracted to where it's like, oh man, Sandra Bullock in space? Gotta see what's going on here.
Yeah. Well, it's very much, it's genre mixing. I think space itself is scary because there's a lot of mystery there, and there's a lot of darkness, and there's a lot of isolation, all of which make for elements of a spooky time, right? But yeah, it's definitely a genre mixing kind of thing where it's also like science fiction and horror. So if you're not that much into science fiction, then like those elements might be a turnoff. But I think this, I mean, if I remember right, this is one of the first, like, space horror movies, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's, it definitely broke a lot of ground.
Aside from the hokey, like, space invader movies and stuff that they had from, like, especially the 50s and 60s, was very big into the science gone wrong.
Right, and even, like, War of the Worlds and stuff, a lot of, like, aliens come here kind of thing. But, yeah, this is, like, the first, like, creepy horror movie, with a horror villain kind of thing, an alien on the ship.
Yeah, and I've seen it a couple of times, and I'm very curious to see how it is this time round, because again, it's one of those things where if you watch it a movie with a certain person, you start to notice different things and actually point things out. Like, for instance, whenever I watch films with you, usually on my own watch, I usually am able to dissect the films, both like on a critiquing standpoint and just on a personal basis. But with you, I'm able just to kind of also pick up stuff that you've picked up also, like a lot of the repeating tropes you see, or like the little foreshadowing bits. That's been especially a big thing that you've picked up on, a lot of foreshadowing, which obviously you are very gifted and knowledgeable whenever it comes to English as a whole and literature.
Sure. I mean, that's just my background. Like, I had a creative writing degree, and so I tend to think of things through a literature lens. So I think that that's helpful in some respects, but it's just a different perspective than I think a lot of people might watch a movie from.
Yeah, for sure. And so we won't waste any more time again, because I obviously know a lot about the film, and I don't know how much you remember about it. I know you said it's been about a decade.
I remember the big classic moments. I remember I was about to say something, I didn't know if it was a spoiler or not, so I'm gonna reference it through a parody. Was it Scary Movie? What was the movie where whenever the first pop
Spaceballs
and it, hello my honey,
yeah,
hello my darling,
that
hello,
was
acting, yeah,
that was Mel Brooks's Spaceballs.
I love Mel Brooks.
Yep.
I should
check, please.
Okay. Yes. Yeah. So I remember iconic moments like that, and I remember the lead character and those sorts of things. But a lot of the details and the overall scope of plot of the film.
So
I probably don't.
I think this will be a pretty interesting episode, because this will be the first time where you've seen it.
Yeah.
But now, especially having like more of a background with horror.
Yeah.
And again, just 10 years, you go through a lot of changes as a person, and so you start to pick up on stuff more. So I think this will be a really insightful, invigorating episode.
Yes.
And so we're going to go ahead and watch the movie, and we'll be back with you as soon as we finish Ridley Scott's 1979 hit classic acclaimed film, Alien. And we have just landed from watching Alien, and so
Alien.
So, how are you feeling, man? How is it revisiting his film about 10 years later?
Yeah, it was good. I forgot most of the plot. I forgot the whole like middle plot with the science guy, and how that comes to a T. Forgot most of the characters besides Sigourney Weaver.
Yeah.
Forgot about the cat. How could I forget about the cat?
Oh yeah, Jones.
Yeah, Jones. Oddly central to the plot, Jones. And no, it was good. It was because I always remembered it being good, but when it's been so long since you've seen the movie, it's like I don't remember why it was good.
Exactly.
Yeah, just being back in it. I mean, such a good atmosphere. It's really it feels so Star Warsy, like early Star Warsy. It came out around the same time,
Yeah.
And it definitely some 2001: A Space Odyssey vibes too, especially with like Mother and so cool, such a good movie.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. Truth be told, whenever I went into this movie, I kind of went in with the mindset, because I've seen it like quite a few times, that every time I'm like, I like it. But I actually went in being like, okay, I'm going to be like super duper critical of everything and really scrutinize it, because I feel like to understand a film, I always like to kind of go in with a fine-tooth comb after repeat viewings, and really just kind of go in almost like trying to make myself find a way to hate it in some ways, which it's funny, because even with that mentality going in, the movie just like sucks you right in. It's
very well crafted. I agree. I feel like in this podcast, I am always on the end of it's my first viewing, so I don't get to pick up on all those little things that you probably get to pick up on. So I'm glad we had a movie that I like. I've kind of seen before, and now can kind of just like zoom in on a little bit. Because it's like listening to music or something. I feel like if I listen to an album one time, I'm not gonna be like, I don't know if I like that or not. You know, like I have like a base impression of like okay, did I like it? Did I not? But I don't know. Like it's not until you listen to it a couple more times that you're like, oh yeah, this song, I like the way this flows into this. I can't believe that he improved on this from the last.
Yeah,
it's the same thing with movies for me, and so yeah, I like being able to be in the seat where okay, at least I had like one base viewing, even if it was a decade ago.
No, I think it's definitely going to be interesting, kind of taking my repeat viewings and your previous viewing and just kind of comparing notes with one another on that. But before diving really into the meat of everything that this film has to offer, basic rundown for people who haven't seen Alien after all this time. Basically, it's about this delivery crew in space, and they're flying through when all of a sudden they get a signal that's saying, hey, we need to go check out this planet. It seems to be an SOS signal. And so once they land on the planet and find like this disturbing, mysterious, unfamiliar alien craft, that's where the film really starts to take off. I love the background accompaniment from you. Yeah, well, you're my hype man.
Yeah.
Hype man while I'm spitting effects.
Yeah, we're on a budget. I'm in the background giving you these free SFX.
Well, that's good. I'm glad. Links to our rap album will be in the description down below, guys.
Yeah, you already know. You can always catch me on Main Street peddling that shit. $5 a disc, best $5 you ever spent. What are you gonna buy, a bag of burgers with that? Come on.
You can't even buy a bag of burgers. You could buy maybe a burger, or two.
Well, I guess bags of burgers from the Midwest chain. Wait, isn't it Midwest? I don't know. Brahms sells a bag of burgers for $5.95.
Really, it's that cheap?
$5.95, a whole bag of burgers. I know because I just bought one today. I only ate 2 of them. I don't know.
Are they good left over?
We'll find out tonight.
Oh, okay. Well, tune in to see if Aaron's still alive on the next podcast.
Burger update.
Yes, burger update.
I'm gonna get a parasite. It's gonna break through my fucking chest whenever it hatches. Yeah.
Before diving more into specific details, I do want to pick up on one thing you did mention in your brief introduction, kind of talking about the film. But one of the things I think this film does incredibly amazingly well is the atmosphere. It's one of those things that the film is fairly slow pace, as opposed to the usual cat and mouse game we have seen from other films. This is a situation where everything's playing out slowly, and it's kind of a crescendo of an effect going on, and the atmosphere just sells it immediately. From the very beginning, whenever you're with the crew and you're on the Nostromo, you feel like it's a genuine, just average Joes on a ship, just doing their job, delivering packages and whatnot, and that atmosphere really sells it. It just feels like a casual atmosphere. But as you grow to be in the space and explore more and kind of go through the situation that the main characters are going through, the atmosphere just becomes more and more grim, which I think is very well set designed. That the set doesn't change. It doesn't get any scarier, but everything just starts amping up, and it's almost kind of scary going through that ship. So I think the atmosphere of the entire movie just really helps sell everything and helps you get engrossed with the film.
Oh yeah. That might be before we get into critiques, but that might be one of my few critiques is it probably spends a little bit too long setting up, you know what I mean? But I do think that the positive effect of all that is, it builds up this sort of tension, through tedium almost. They're flipping all these switches. They're reading all the binary code that shoots. Where I was complaining to Coale the whole movie about how all their heads-up displays don't display any relevant information because it's 70s sci-fi, so it's yes, this squiggly line chart is really giving me a lot of info right now. And these 3 lines, I know what they mean definitely, and this monitor over here is just shooting off numbers at a rate that I can't even read. It's very helpful to me, there are a lot of flashing lights. They don't have any buttons corresponding to them. They're just flashing at me so you know the ship's working. But anyway, they spend all that time kind of engrossing you in that atmosphere. Lots of steam shooting out everywhere.
Yeah.
Lights flickering. It's one of those like why it feels so much like Star Wars to me is it's like a low tech sci-fi. You know what I mean?
Yes.
There's all these LED screens and stuff, so it just sets up this almost precarious atmosphere of just like. We're flying through space on these ships that are always breaking down, and they're like rust buckets, and so just that alone, being alone in space on like a rickety old thing, is scary in itself. It feels very much like old ship tales, you know what I mean? Like we're on this wooden craft in the middle of the fucking ocean, and the forces of the fucking ocean are going to demolish us, yeah, we're defying nature right now. It gives you that sort of ominous vibe as just the setting. And then here comes, primal nature itself, the aliens.
Yeah, I think you definitely hit a lot of points with the ship, and it's almost on the same level of Star Wars when it comes to like the vibe of the interior of the ship and everything. I will say whenever I watch Star Wars, I do get the more fantastical kind of with design, whereas this is like strictly kind of, I'm trying to think of the word, but yeah, more rudimentary, blocky, and looks like something that would be practically built.
Right. Well, like what I feel like the Star Wars comparison here is this feels like the Millennium Falcon that they're on. You know what I mean? It doesn't feel like the Imperial ships. It doesn't feel like the Rebels. It doesn't feel like the new Star Wars or anything like that, where everything's all nice and polished. And whatever.
Yeah.
It feels like you're riding on the rust bucket Millennium Falcon.
Yeah.
And something's gonna break at any point. Yeah.
Which I think just sells it even more because with the ship and the crew you have, they're a bunch of delivery drivers, it's not their policy just to be prepared for any oncoming threats or anything. So of course they're not going to have like, a decked out ship prepared for battle and everything else.
Working class folks. Yeah, they're just trying to, literally some of the first dialogue in the film is they're like, where's our bonuses? They're like trying to negotiate salary. They're like, get unionized, guys. Come on. These are ununionized, low-wage workers.
Yeah, and to compare to the overall mood and atmosphere and overall vibes of the ship, which you spend pretty much like 85-90% of the movie on.
Oh, yeah.
Is whenever they decide to go down to that... Oh, you're slapping my metal.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to get all metal on you.
Ooh, heavy metal. But anyways, the planet they land on is very stark contrast. Like, it's just almost stormy, and yet feels foreign. It doesn't feel quite like a snowstorm exactly. And then once they arrive at that alien shipcraft, like, the whole interior aesthetic of everything is so bizarre. I know you were mentioning beforehand, you're like, oh, isn't this the one with a lot of the I'll let you run away with it.
It's a very vaginal setting. There's a lot of reproductive imagery, and that was intentional from interviews and stuff that I remember watching.
Yeah, H.R. Geiger, I believe it was. Yeah, his design, it's one of those things that it is almost like very phallic-y, but at the same time, it just delivers the exact mood it needed.
Well, so much of them, and we can get into this when we talk more about the intricate details of the plot and everything, but rewatching this now, I realize just how much of it is not even necessarily like reproductive in nature, but like even like extending to like motherly and like feminine. Like the entire movie is like feminine, quote unquote, and I wouldn't say it's like, I'm not here to be like it's pro female or anything, but literally all the imagery is like vaginal. You're talking about Mother is the thing that controls the ship. Ripley is the woman in charge. They're all in this mess because they didn't listen to the woman.
dude, I'm gonna have to bring up a point later because it will be diving into spoilers, but I wish you would have been in this class with me, because long story short, in college, whenever I was taking courses, one of the courses I took was women's literature and art, but needless to say, I said something about the movie Alien in the classroom, and it was just like, it's not even a ripple. Apparently it was just like a huge bomb
Just
went off.
dropping a boulder in the water.
I so badly want to talk about it, but I wish you would have been my wingman in that situation, backing me up.
I mean, when we get to that point, I'll probably tell you about some of my stories of just awful college classroom discussions that people have had, but
oh my
anyway.
gosh, but we're gonna have to bring that up. I so badly, but you just hitting all those points about like pro female and stuff. One, wish you would have been there with me years ago. Two, I actually agree with you. I really like that aspect, and I never really picked up on. And this is kind of diving back into the characters a little bit, but Ripley, played by Sigourney Weaver, is such a dang strong character.
Oh, yeah.
Like, she's the one gal you want to have whenever you're in the worst situation possible. And so just mad props to it. We've talked about like a lot of the female protagonists. I think whenever it comes to the world of horror, she's like top of the line for me. And it's also really well acted. She was believable. It didn't feel like a character that was just specifically written to be up on a pedestal. It just felt like a genuinely strong character that you could sympathize with, which is super important in a film like this, that you want the people to survive in the situation they find themselves in. So I think you definitely hit a lot of strong points, and were able to make great connections to a lot of the thematic elements that's in the movie Alien itself. I think that was it on the settings itself, and I want to dive more into characters, which I guess we can go ahead and dive in, unless you had something.
Well, the one thing, we kind of cut ourselves off before we talked about that creepy alien exterior.
Yes, definitely go on with that.
I just want to, it's like a I don't know, like a skeleton graveyard of a ship. Like, literally everything looks like, the inside of the walls look like rib cages, and like the floor, like it looks like you're walking through a body, and then there's just this mysterious skeleton sitting in front of.
It's such a strong scene.
It's like this giant skeleton sitting in front of what it looks like a telescope or something. I don't know, some sort of big panel that comes down, and I love that ship that they dive into where they find the original eggs for the aliens.
Yeah, and the corpse of the alien that is in that, like, I guess like captain's chair or something like that. They don't really talk about it. They just look and are like, what the heck is this? And they never go back to it, which in some cases may be a flaw against a film, but I think it just adds to the mysteriousness of this. And pun intended, but everything's so alien to them inside that ship. And whenever it comes to other designs, like, again, this film has such a strong design where if you see the way, like, especially H.R. Geiger's drawings and everything, it just stands out immediately. But one of the things that I like but hate at the same time, but not for a bad reason, is the design of, once they get down to the bed of the ship, all of the eggs. Like, I don't know what it is. Like, I'm not too terribly grossed out whenever it comes to certain stuff. Like, if it's like eye gouging, stuff like that, yeesh, no thank you. But those eggs are so unsettling, and they were damn fine built. Like, it's just great construction overall. They're believable.
There's plenty of moments in the film where I'm just like tense because I know what's about to happen, and I'm like, stop. I think that was probably where I was the most tense, is where he's like messing with that egg, and I was like, I know what happens. Don't fuck with the eggs.
But like
seeing the things move inside, and it's just like fleshy, but also like hard, like a nut to open, and it's I don't like it.
Yeah, well, that's the thing with practical effects. I'm always a giant fan of practical effects, but sometimes you watch films and you're like, okay, that kind of looks cheesy. Like these eggs, I don't know how much time they spent, but they just look genuinely real.
So much of the practical effects in this film is amazing. There are really like a few corny moments.
Oh, for sure.
But like given the test of time, I mean, given that this was made in about the same time as the original Star Wars, and they've had to gone back and redigitize a lot of things and take out some of the practical effects that looked really corny. But if you see
such a stupid decision.
yeah, but yeah, and I mean so many. I mean this is definitely Star Wars level or above. I think of just like how well they executed the practical effects.
And it's crazy because like looking at the film, I looked at it and apparently its budget, it was pretty big, but it was just 11 million.
Yeah, okay. It's probably the biggest budget horror film we've seen so far.
Yeah,
on this
I think it
podcast.
is.
I would only guess just by watching.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, they really. I mean, I just think they nailed it out of the park. Setting, props, all the effects. I mean, just great.
And again, I feel like we really want to dive into so much, but there is like a lot to spoil with this film because it's so much stuff to dissect and everything. So we'll probably have to like drop this conversation and probably just mosey on back since we already mentioned Ripley.
Yeah, talk about characters.
Herself. Yeah, talk about the characters. How did you feel these group of characters were compared to the other groups of characters we've encountered so far?
Honestly, there's not a single actor in that cast that I felt like didn't do it. There's no corny person, you know, there's no... the lines were all delivered well, you know. I felt like they were all really grade A actors, or at least in this film they did some grade A acting. And yeah, I mean, so from that aspect they were great, but just each character had a really discernible personality that wasn't, none of it was over the top. I mean, it was just, I think it was a really great cast, and especially a really great cast to be put under a lot of pressure, because you can see how each one of them reacts to it differently, right? We can kind of go into that when we get into more spoiler territories, but like the other girl there, I forget her name, you know, she was like the nervous breakdown
Lambert.
Lambert breaks down. I'm just going to be describing these people because I don't remember any of their names except for Ripley, but the black guy goes straight
Parker.
to violence. Yeah. Okay, the other mechanic guy is just like a dope.
Brett, I think it was.
Okay, you're so much better with names than I am.
It's okay. That's
Science guy is cold and calculated.
Ash.
Yeah. I remember Ash now. And then the captain is just like in charge, but you could tell he's just like getting overwhelmed, and it's so interesting to see how all of them sort of crack under pressure.
Yep, it's Captain Dallas, just to name the last one.
Dallas.
Fortunately, this isn't like a huge cast, so which I think definitely works to its advantage again, because the setting overall, like we've mentioned before, it's kind of one of those creepy things that you're just in the middle of space, which is vast, absolutely.
And I think it's such an excellent setting for horror, because other films we've watched have had this, right, where they go to a cabin in the woods or whatever, and then this is the cast of characters, and there's no one coming to help them, right? So you know that it's self-enclosed, but most of the films we've watched, there's always an element of like, they are still connected to the outside world of, like, you know, the mom and dad are connected, or the police officer's going to come, or whoever. There's some help that could perceivably come, and in this one, they give you no indication that there's any help for miles. Like,
oh, for sure,
they're caught in this ship, and there's nowhere they can run to.
Yeah,
because there's nothing but space around them.
Yeah,
you know. So it's such a brilliant setting for horror specifically.
It is, and I think, again, just having these cast of characters, which are very much believable, like, even though Ripley is definitely very strong and capable of taking on a lot of stuff in a job, again, you don't get the sense that you feel like she could just, like, fight, like, hordes of aliens.
No,
like
she's
that.
not like a, she's not like a, I don't know, a Mary Sue is what somebody might call it. She's not like the self-insert character that's like, I'm super powerful, you know?
Yeah.
She is just a strong female lead that is, you know, has a mission.
Yeah.
It makes sense that she's, headstrong and kind of always right, because she's the co-captain, right? It's her job to make correct decisions and execute on them flawlessly, right? Like, that's her character. And she does it brilliantly. You don't feel like she's gonna tackle the alien and punch its lights out or whatever, but you feel like she's going to assess the situation and make it the right decision, even though we could talk about this later, even if she doesn't always do that because she's under pressure. It's like a realistic cracking under pressure,
which I think it's definitely great, because really, whenever it comes to the groups and them kind of really stressing out about the situation, typically they're lopped off so quick that you don't really get to see them kind of start to crack under pressure. So I think you definitely make a lot of great descriptions of all of the characters and their place in the film, because I feel like every character has their place in a film. The only one that I've felt that I'm like, what is she really doing, is Lambert. But again, it could be one of the things.
Lambert's like, I think they all have a unique voice, and I think Lambert's voice is the voice of just horror. She's horrified. She's terrified. All these others are like, all right, you know, especially with Dallas and Ripley and Ash, they're all like cold calculated. So Dallas and Ripley are like, all right, let's make a plan to get this guy, and then the black guy's like, fuck yeah, I'm gonna beat the shit out of him, you know?
Yeah, he's the hype man.
Yeah, and Lambert's there like, this thing is fucking killing us, and I'm terrified, and I don't want to be here anymore. Let's just leave. You know, she's that voice, and I think all those voices are like different. Like sections of the human response, like the human fear response, you know what I mean?
Holy crap, that's like a deeper thing than I was going to even grab for, but you hit it right on the head.
I just think, like Lambert's the flight. You know, so many others are in fight mode, and she's like, I want to get the fuck out of this shit.
Yeah, and I feel like there's a lot of characters like that can be over the top and just annoying. Like, you understand they're stressed out, but then even...
Right.
Other people are like, okay, knock it off. But fortunately, Lambert keeps like a fairly even keel and only really just starts to panic towards the very end. I think
that's a lot of acting, but it's also a lot of intentional, I'm sure, direction, because you can see the terror on her face, right? A lot of that's acting, but you also see the sweat, how her hair's messed up throughout the entire scene. You can see visually she's terrified, and that's something that needs to be executed on. Because, you know, acting isn't just talking and how you and even just your body actions. It's so much more. It's the whole character. So I just think Ridley Scott did an excellent job of making her look terrified without her having to be like, guys, I'm terrified all the time, you know, because that can get annoying.
Yeah, and I just realized while talking about it, I think there might be a weaker character than what we just mentioned. And that's Kane, who we haven't even brought up.
Kane, well... poor Kane.
He's kind of more the catalyst. I feel like his place in the story is not so much just to provide stuff. Again, he's just more of the catalyst for the story.
Yeah, absolutely.
There. So, I mean, while I wish there would have been a little more defining characteristics with Kane, I felt like he served his place in the story and had one of the most unconvincing falls I've ever seen in a movie. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Whenever he slips off of the with the eggs, It's funny.
Yeah, but I mean, like I said, it's like
I bought it because he's in like a bulky spacesuit trying to like balance
that's true.
beam on this thing, so he's just like just this clumsy ass fall into the egg.
I guess that would be true, especially if they're not used to, you know, going on alien planets. But it was funny to see him go
right,
just fall down. But even though like not every character is like 112% like super build, like, oh man, I feel like there's a lot of rich characters. I feel like they're very strong enough characters and you want to see them survive, which is important because as you probably have been in with some certain situations, you're just like, I can't wait for that guy to die.
Yeah.
I am ready for him to get the axe. And I know this, I can't really decide if this is a spoiler or not, but surprise, there's an alien in the film. And so without going too much into what do you think about the alien specifically?
I think
towards the end,
it's a really strong design. I don't think it's too much to say that there are like levels with this alien, and I think that's the strongest part about it. We can kind of talk about that later in the spoiler part. And it just adds to the mystery of like, you don't know what's coming next, you know what I mean? But the sort of like the alien we have in the end, I will like knock off minor points of him as a killer, because once you start seeing him in full light and like stuff, it's like you can tell the practical effect is some guy in a suit. He looks kind of Godzilla-y at times, you know, like, you know, walking kind of clumsy. And so, like, just that aging of the practical effects might knock off just a smidge of it. But I think as a design, it's like, it's pure. Which is how they talk about the alien, too, as, like, a pure organism.
Yeah.
But, like, yeah, it's an alien. It wants to kill you and eat you because that's how it survives, you know? So it's like a hunter. It would be like if you let loose a rabid panther on your ship or something. Like, yeah, it's going to pop out of the vent and grab me because that's what they do. Yeah. So, like, sure, like, I totally buy it. There's not, like, a lot of, like, motive that I have to be like, oh, well, what is Jason's motivation really, you know?
Yeah.
But, yeah, so it sort of sells it easily. Like, this is a terrifying alien creature. You know why it's killing people. So, yeah, like, I think its design, just as, like, from an aesthetic point of view, is, like, yeah, it's clean. You know what I mean? Very phallic, but it's
yeah, he definitely does look like just a sort of like
penis.
Elevated.
He looks like a penis. An elevated penis.
Xenomorph, more like Pinomorph.
Hey. That's why he opens his mouth and he's got another dick inside. You know what I'm saying? You're like, what?
He's penetrating.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, yeah, despite, yes, again, fitting with the phallic aesthetic of the film, I do believe that, you know, I do buy into the fact that, okay, I could see this alien existing, like this predatorial, creature that prowls and kills. It does look a little goofy at times, so it does make me wonder, like, how scary it'd be. I mean, it'd be scary, but if it was in broad daylight, just wiggling around.
The one thing that's, like, I didn't remember until rewatching this film is its hands. Its hands are so awkward. It feels like it's always trying to, like, hug you. There's a couple death scenes where, you know, he pops out and he's got his hands, like, boop, you know? Yeah. And that's a little cheesy. But...
Do you remember the one with jazz hands?
Yeah.
that one always, it's terrifying and hysterical at the same time for me, but I think overall it's still a very strong design. Another great design by H.R. Geiger on that, and again, you do buy it and it does fit the purpose and it fits with the overall aesthetic of the film, which it really, again, helps make this consistent all the way throughout, which I think is important for films. Because I feel like anytime a film loses you, it has to try to reel you back in with something. So I feel, like I said, even with me being heavily scrutinizing the film at the beginning and almost trying to find a way to not like it, it just still reeled me in slowly but slowly. Because that is one of my critiques is, whenever it comes to the pacing of the story, it is a little slow at first. I understand. And the whole movie as a whole definitely has a fairly slow pace, even towards the end, where it does speed up a little bit, but it is a very slow movie.
Right. I feel like a lot of that is intentional, but, you know, and there's ups and downs to it. The up is that, you know, while you're waiting for something to happen and you know something's going to happen, it does build that tension. And it also gives them a chance to show you the beautiful sets that they made and get you really invested in the atmosphere. But most of the time, whenever there's these really soft moments or long, boring moments, is because they're trying to show them, like, working on a ship and they're, like, doing work. You know, I mean, they have to punch some buttons and change out the carburetor or whatever you do on a ship. And so, but it does get, the pacing is a little slow as a result. And even though it is slow, I can understand, like you mentioned, why they do it. It's just to sell the fact even further, like, this is what they do on a regular basis. Like, it shows them going through the motions, waking up from the pods, and just, you know, again, flipping switches, fixing pipes that are leaking, stuff like that. So I think that definitely helps sell it. Because I feel like the moment it starts to speed up a tiny bit and really starts to grab me is as soon as they enter that ship. As soon as they entered that ship, I just knew immediately, like, I'm already in. Like, I had tried
so hard just to be like, okay, I'm just really going to scrutinize the crap out of this film. And then I just immediately am sucked into it by the ship, which is pretty impressive since I think that was at like the 20-minute mark or something like that, or even less than that.
Yeah.
So I think that's definitely speaks for it because the film's like 2 hours. So from that point on, you're still like reeled in. And again, I feel like Ridley Scott is just slowly reeling you in.
Yeah.
And even though there isn't like a strong narrative to it, I still feel like there is a good narrative flow to where you don't feel like it's just a free-for-all in a battleship.
No, absolutely. And the way they string together each of the aliens' kills, right? It makes so much sense. Because that's one of the things that I've been noticing as we watch more and more horror movies is that you can tell the director has in mind, or the script has written in, this person dies here, this person dies here, and then they just have to like connect the dots, and sometimes they do it really clumsily, you know? Like, you have to find a reason for her to run up these stairs, and you know. But this movie is just, I mean, everything makes sense. They're making logical decisions, and yet the alien hunts them, and it manages to pick them off one by one. So.
Yeah. I'm trying to think. Another point I did want to bring up that it kind of plays into the atmosphere is it's kind of similar to Texas Chainsaw Massacre, where there's not a whole lot of music. You just get that low rumbling of the ship for the majority of it.
Yeah.
And whenever it does have the orchestral music coming through, I feel like it's not even like loud in your face. It's usually more subdued, which I think helps add to the overall atmosphere.
Yeah, like last episode we watched Nightmare on Elm Street.
Oh yeah,
and all the kill scenes, like the music plays a really forward role where it's like music, and you're like yeah. This one it's so in the background, and it's really that atmospheric role almost always, and I kind of love that. It just makes it feel more like space. It makes it, you know, where space is silent, you know.
No, that's exactly it. So I think that's major points once again for Alien. I'm trying to look at any like pros and cons of the film that I found, just any critiques. So is there any other points before we kind of really dig into all of the spoilers that are clearly like just in the rest of this podcast that we're all trying to hold back?
No, I don't think so. Those are really my two critiques of the film is just slow pacing in parts and some practical effects that haven't aged well. But
I guess one question I do want to ask, because I am curious about it with our prologue where you mentioned you had to watch the film because you're like, I need to go back and watch all the classics.
Sure.
And it wasn't until I had said, hey, let's watch this film for the podcast where you're like, oh yeah, I guess it is kind of horror.
Yeah.
How scary was it for you, and how horrific is it as a film?
On rewatch, I mean, 100% horror movie, right? I just kind of cataloged it in my brain always as science fiction because it is also definitely science fiction. But it's both those genres really firmly. It has the sort of the tropes and identity points of both of those things. And it pulls both of them off really strongly, I think, which it can be, I guess it can be tempting to lean too far into science fiction or lean too far into horror whenever you or mix genres of any kind. But, firmly horror, and I think it's pretty darn scary in parts, too. Just the way they set everything up and get you tense.
Because even though it's not like a moment where you feel like there's a sense of safety, like, okay, nothing scary is going to happen.
Right.
It just always keeps that same moderate level of tensity where it's going through, and then it just has like a spike intensity before going back down to that mid-tier tensity, which I think is very hard for a film to do, because there's a lot of horror films I watch where I feel like even if I've seen the film or haven't seen the film, I feel like, okay, nothing's going to happen in the scene, and you get to feel like you take a breath. I feel like you can't take a breath. And again, this is like my third or fourth time watching a movie, and I still feel like I can't take a breath, especially towards the climax of the movie, which is probably one of my favorite parts of any film ever. Like, it's just a solid shot scene, which again, I'll talk more in spoilers, but it definitely has, it's very tense, and it does have a couple of scares. I was even surprised one of them got you. I think it was it Jazz Hands?
I think so.
I felt
There's several that got me, honestly.
Really,
I think the Jazz Hands one did. Yeah.
Yeah, I only know that because while I was watching the movie, I just felt the couch shake a little bit, which I think that speaks loudly because I never felt like the jump scares or anything were cheap.
No.
I felt like they were well delivered and didn't come out of the blue. And even if some started to come out of the blue, it didn't feel cheap at all.
Right.
It felt well placed. So I think that's also major bonus points for this film. So yeah, absolutely. I'm glad we got to watch this film. So just to let the audience know before we start digging into all the spoilers that are here, what would you rate Ridley Scott's 1979 classic Alien, Aaron?
I was really kind of debating back and forth, but there's really not many things I can point to knock points off of. Honestly, it's a really strong 9 for me. It's a crazy good film, and it stands the test of time reasonably well. Again, just like the only two things are, I understand why they paced it the way they did, but I feel like, especially if I were to rewatch it a couple more times, maybe those slower parts would just feel even slower. I wonder if that's a product of aging too, because I wonder if just at the time that was so much more engaging because there weren't a lot of movies like that. But now I'm like, yes, I know you press the beep boop buttons.
Yeah.
And then just some really corny effects that, what would you do in the 70s but put on those corny effects, so I can't dock too much off for that. So like a really strong 9. Like I was debating a 10, but I thought, no, there is a couple things that I can scratch it for.
Absolutely. And I believe is that what you rated Texas Chainsaw Massacre? Was that a 9 or was that an 8?
It might have been an 8, just because that was our first film. But that was a strong 8 if it was an 8.
Yeah. So
I love Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
No, yeah, me too. I think it's definitely strong. But I'm actually with you right there. Because initially starting the film, I thought I was going to be lower than my original score. But again, it just reels you in and takes you for a ride. And at the end, you're just already like, wow. So I'm also with you at a solid 9. I honestly, even at the beginning, I was like, oh, yeah, okay, it's going pretty slow. But just all the things that I knew were in the film, again, it's just so refreshing to watch. And I will confirm with you, the slow moments do end up being a little bit slower at some portions where I'm just like, okay, yes, it's atmospheric, we get it, move on. But again, I feel like it's also necessary for the type of film it is, because it's not like a quick, action paced thing where you're just flying through and everything. It's a very slow burn.
Right. And I think they knew what they were doing. They just and they probably understood the trade-offs too. It's like, okay, this might lose the audience attention in a time or two, just because of that slow pace. But it gains it back real quickly whenever it and it feels like it earns it when it does.
Absolutely. So yeah, I mean, I feel like we've danced around all the spoilers we have here. So as always, I'm going to give you the courtesy to give the very first spoiler you want to discuss here on a silver platter.
All right, I'm never prepared for this. First spoiler I want to talk about is Sigourney Weaver in a tiny white shirt and some panties. I thought that lasted for much longer in the movie because that was one of the things I remembered about the movie. It's only for like 45 seconds before she gets into a spacesuit.
Yeah,
that's the number one spoiler. That part doesn't last as long. Neither does okay, I guess she does walk around with the flamethrower a lot long, because that was the other thing I remembered. I was like, yeah, but I didn't realize, because I knew there was a lot of flamethrower action in this movie. Nobody actually used the flamethrower on the alien. Who knows if it would work or not?
That's kind of the tricky thing about it, because the only one who got close enough was Dallas whenever he was climbing through the vents, but even then, the flame wasn't far enough. It just illuminated, showing that the alien's standing there doing the jazz hands, and then it just cuts away, so you assume he wasn't able to get there. And the only other person who got close to even attacking it was Parker whenever Lambert was cornered, but he's like, I don't really want to blow up Lambert as well, so he decides, all right, I'm going to let adrenaline go in and tackle this alien, which nobody had done. Nobody really knows how strong this thing is.
It is very strong.
It adds to the mystique of it. Which again, it's like, Signori is just holding this flamethrower because she's thinking like, okay, this is the only thing we have on board to fight this alien. So that long period where she's roaming through the halls and the smoke is just going crazy, that is like one of my favorite cinematic moments, is just that. And it's just like all you hear is just the hissing of the smoke and the sirens going off and the lights. Like it's I could watch that over and over and over again. And because again, the sets itself are so strong, just those hallways, and Sigourney Weaver just sells it that she is trying to get out of here alive. So
probably shouldn't have saved this for the spoiler part, but epilepsy warning. Holy shit! At the end, it's just flashing.
Oh
lights.
my gosh, it's super crazy with all the stuff they do. But again, I don't feel like it's fortunately like Japanese cartoon levels of epilepsy, but it gets pretty close.
But it's intense and it's sharp, and I get why. But there's a lot of that.
But jumping back to the other thing, that scene always stuck out with me. Once she's able to relax in the space pod and she undresses and she just has nothing on but her like crop top and panties.
Right, because she's about to go into Cairo freeze.
Exactly. And now I guess I'm getting on to the like analyzing the overall meaning of it. But again, it's just kind of, she's been dressed up the entire time. You never see her in that attire. And so that's her just allowing herself to let her guard back down and be vulnerable and everything. And which I think adds to the powerfulness of the scene once she realizes, oh no, there's an alien on board.
Right. And it's also like, and I hate to dive into this point too strongly, but it's like, it's the first time you see her really feminine in the movie. You know what I mean? She's like dressed down to her skivvies. She kind of lets her hair down. Her, in classic old movie fashion, her nipples be poking through her shirt. It's very, it's the first time you see her kind of sexualized. Yeah. Or any of the people in the movie sexualized. And then she sees the penis monster. Yeah. And then she sees the xenomorph, right? So it's sort of that threat to femininity that the xenomorph poses, and that's maybe a little too analytical, but
And I think, again, you've provided a perfect segue for me to jump to the earlier point I had about the class.
Tell the audience the class story.
Okay, so I'm in this classroom, and we're talking about this short story about this woman who wrote about the society where men are the ones who have to give birth to children. Like it's like this science experiment government kind of thing where they are basically using the men as vessels for babies as opposed to women. I can't tell you who wrote it or anything, but I'm hearing this, and whenever it came to thoughts about it, I just mentioned, it kind of reminds me of Alien, in the fact that that was their whole goal, is to get people pregnant with it, and it's like this whole government thing. That did not sit well. That did not sit well. And she's like, it is nothing like Alien. I said, okay, I didn't say it's exactly like Alien.
It just reminds you.
Yeah, it reminded me. And that so many hot red laser beams poked at me, which again, I'm not going to start like a social debate on like the comparison of Alien as a movie to this short story, because I don't feel like I'm really the right person to talk about it. It was just an observation I made. I'm like, oh yeah, kind of like Alien, just like a whole secret government thing going on, but that did not sit well. But at the end of the day, I was very fortunate to actually make some good friends from that class.
Oh, good.
Yeah, no, they're super cool gals, and basically took me in whenever everyone grouped up and nobody wanted to be in a group with me. So, thank you to Amanda and Kendra, if for some reason you ever listen to this, for being very cool human beings and taking me in.
Thanks, Amanda and Kendra.
Yeah, major claps for y'all. So that's my story. So I really wish you would have been my wingman to help save my butt from saying that.
No. Alien is actually, I don't have like the research background to firmly say this, but just watching it now and having heard the things that I've heard, I'd say, it deserves its place in feminist film. There's plenty, I'm sure, feminist film theory has to say about this movie. Now you could probably give that a sweet Google, and there's probably a million results about feminist film theory and Alien. No. But very strong female protagonist is always the first clue in. But just there's so many themes about like the people that are right and the people that are authority figures that are being ignored or undermined are the women.
Yes.
And the end result, like, and the people that have the most threat to them often are even the women. And there's so much about motherly and like feminine traits, like even Ripley, who you think of as like this, she's so kind of manly in a way, right? She takes charge, she's action, she's not afraid to get violent or assertive, but at the end of her day, her fatal flaw, I mean, not fatal because she doesn't die, but her flaw at the end is she has to go save this cat because she has like that mother instinct of like saving Jones.
Yeah, and that's what I really like about it, because if she was just very cold-hearted or whatever, she would have left that cat for dead. Like, she doesn't care, but no, she's like, I'm going to try to save everybody I can. And I think it's funny that you specifically say motherly, since the computer itself is named Mother.
Mother, right. I feel like that system was super inspired by HAL.
For sure.
2001: A Space Odyssey. But yes, it's that system. It's, Mother knows best. Mother knows everything. And so everything that they run through, all these data points and everything, is Mother. And that's even, Ripley has to eventually go to Mother to figure out that they're getting betrayed, essentially, by their science officer.
Yeah, which, again, you brought this up about, like, her being undermined whenever she's trying to do the right thing, is whenever Kane is attacked by that face hugger, and they bring him inside, they're like, hey, you need to bring him inside. She's like, no, like, protocol specifically states, if this happens, don't do that. But obviously, Ash lets him in because he wants the alien on board, but that is a very strong point, so I think, especially for the time, because this came out in 1979, because I know there's been a heavy push in movement for, like, women to be equally treated as men, which, it's sad that we have to keep pressing this point in 2021, whenever it should have been done. But besides the point, they already have this kind of film. I think it speaks powerfully and also helps that it's a really dang good film, that it keeps its place.
Well, 70s and 80s, if I remember right, it's been a long time since I've been in a film theory class, but I have been in a few, and that I feel like a lot of like feminist literature about film, specifically feminist film theory, is like in that time range, 70s, 80s, where they're talking about, a lot of it is about, horror movies. It's about, because there's a lot of things to dissect in how women are treated and targeted in horror movies. And I'm positive, again, because I go into this blind, I haven't read up beforehand, but I'm positive there's a lot of feminist film theory about Alien specifically. So
yes, and that is one thing to keep in mind whenever it comes to feminism. I don't claim to be an expert on the subject. Pretty much my philosophy is treat every human being with respect, regardless of who they are as a person. And so that is definitely important to point out. So I'm glad I have you, who has had even more theory than what I had with that one class. So I think it is very great that this is not only a strong horror film, not only a strong science fiction film, but just a strong, just feminist fueled movie without feeling like it's pandering to the audience at all. It just feels so genuine. So I think
if you haven't watched it, I mean, hopefully if you're not in spoiler territory now, if you haven't watched this, but if you don't care about spoilers and you're listening to it, don't mistake when I say this is a feminist film to be like, this is like girl power and they play female rock music the whole time kind of. I'm talking about, this is like a movie that shows the, in subtle undertones, shows the plight of woman. It's very literally about the struggle of a woman, right? And her whole crew. It shows sort of some of those, even in space, even in the future, some of the struggles one has to reach respect as a woman, as the co-captain of this ship, to have her orders be obeyed or whatever. It's a movie that's, it's not directly about feminism or whatever. It's not going to tell you a message at the credits of the film about like, please let women hold higher jobs. But it's about, at its core, that is one of the main struggles of the film, is that, things would be a lot better now if somebody had listened to the woman. Right? That's what I mean when I'm talking about, and why I'm sure a lot of feminist theory exists out there to talk about. And of course also just how, sexual and vaginal so much of the scenery and props are.
Oh, for sure. And
the face hugger specifically.
Oh my gosh.
Shoots eggs into your body or whatever, and it looks like a giant vagina that opens and clamps in your face. Yeah, and that's all intentional.
Yeah, that face hugger, I tell you what, like, aside from whenever its dead body fell onto the ground and just felt like a rubber thing, it looked so real, especially whenever they're dissecting the underside of it. It's so unnerving just seeing it. And again, whenever it latches on to Kane's face and they're like trying to figure out how do we take it off, like its breathing it has in its sack and how it tightens up, like I just bought that. Even though it's really just a prop,
right,
I believed it was real.
Oh yeah,
like it's super convincing. And even after it's dead, where it doesn't have to do anything, just the amount of detail they went to create, like I assume it looks super fleshy. Like it's hard to think it isn't flesh. They use it both in the egg and on the face hugger itself. So it's such strong designs and uncomfortable designs. It delivers that horror undertone very well. And with the xenomorph itself, the one scene, which I'm sure you mentioned this at the very beginning of the introduction, and obviously everyone knows about it, but that chest burster scene. I've always made the joke that whenever people talk about pregnancy, and I just talk about being fortunate that I will never have to go through that, because I can't imagine the amount of like labor. I mean, literally, it's in the word.
Right.
It is to deliver life into this world. But if I had to imagine it, it'd be like the chest burster scene in Alien, except probably a little worse.
Takes a little longer.
Yes, exactly. But that scene,
Holy guacamole.
it's done so well also, because it's just like a big sigh of relief, like, oh, it's dead. I'm glad you're feeling better, Kane. And it doesn't happen immediately once you see he's okay. It happens just in the next scene at the breakfast table, where again, they're like eating food and just the retching and just the blood exploding.
Yeah. And they're preparing to get into Cairo Freeze, so you're like, all right, they're about to be safe, And, that scene is executed like 99% perfectly. The 1% that is wrong is and after the alien bursts out and it scuttles away, and it looks like somebody's just pulling it on a string or something.
It was like Speedy Gonzalez kind of fast levels, goes like flying everything to the side. But
it was really funny. If they had made it like slither off somehow, I mean, I know I'm asking a lot for 70s practical effects, but if it had slithered off at an extreme speed or something, then it would have been a lot cooler.
Yeah, because that one scene always just sticks with me. Like first, whenever Kane's chest, like his blood explodes through his shirt, and then the xenomorph tears through.
Down, like they're holding down this force that's pushing out.
And then just seeing that like newborn xenomorph is just so unsettling and creepy, just looking as it's covered in blood. It is such a strong design, and then it just quickly evolves into the giant kind of xenomorph creature. And its introduction, I feel like it's done really well whenever Brett is like trying to look for Jones, which got scared off, and he wanders into that room where there's like I don't know what it is, just water dripping down in the chains, and it just pretty much allows the xenomorph to blend right in. So I know for a fact they designed that set specifically to be the introduction, but it's so strong, and just seeing it be so wet and just the ooze that's coming off of there.
Right. And just understanding that it evolved too, like while he's looking for Jones the cat, he sees this like the skin that it shed, and he pulls it up, and he's like, oh shit, like
Yeah.
it's already growing, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And you just don't expect it to have grown to the size that it grows whenever it stands up in front of him, and it's like, you know, 7 feet tall or some shit.
Yes.
It's just like,
Oh man. Yeah, it's definitely unsettling as a creature, but albeit it is goofy a little bit, especially towards the end whenever Ripley launches it into space and it's just
you can tell it's like
there.
a guy in a suit.
Yeah.
Like,
doing it, but I feel like it is still relatively well done where I'm still like buying it. Like, okay, it's a goofy, but I'm buying it.
Right. That's one of the parts where he like wasn't as scary for me is whenever he's like tucked in that little
it was so strange that he was just like sleepy almost.
Right, like I got it at first because he's like hiding in the ship or whatever, but then like he doesn't. It takes him a really long time to like try to get out. She's like just staring at him while she's like putting on the suit and everything, which I get because he's like an animal, you know. He's not making the most rational decisions. He's probably eaten plenty since he's killed all these people.
Yeah,
you know,
and he could be just asleep. We don't ever see its eyes, so we don't know what's going on with it. But yeah, that is definitely one of the moments where I do like the scene, but at the same time, I also agree that I'm like, shouldn't it be already like killing? Like you just heard the giant big explosion. How are you still like nestled in?
Right.
And everything
and
else.
He's smart enough to have like gotten into the ship that she was in, but then like didn't execute on it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Perfect specimen. Speaking of him, you know, I'm gonna make this pun, but Ash, more like ass. Watching this film again, he is so irritating and is blatantly, obviously, the bad guy.
And you can see, but like having watched it, because I forgot about that subplot until we got closer, and I was like, oh yeah, like this whole reason was to go get the alien.
Yes.
So it makes things like he kind of turns off the computer that shows the baby inside Kane whenever he's just like, you don't need to look at that. He's like, I don't know what that is. Just turn it off real quick. You know, he makes these little subtle things. You know, of course, obviously letting Kane into the ship in the first place, like disobeying Ripley's orders, just like the little things he does to sabotage them, because of course he's a robot and his priority number one is get this alien. But,
oh man, yeah, that's the one other person I have a problem with a little bit. Like I think it's great plot device. Like I feel like the fact they didn't have to throw in this under plot where it's like, oh, guess what? You thought you were just going to be delivering stuff. Actually, you guys are going to help bring this alien to us.
It makes so much more sense because there's like, they could have, you're so right. They could have easily just, this was a distress signal to go there. Oh no, it was actually a warning signal to get it. And that was the whole reason they were there. But like, why did it wake them up? Exactly. It was a question that Ripley had in the beginning, you know?
Yeah.
And she's like, oh, it's protocol. The ship's supposed to wake us up if there was a distress signal. And it's always Ash that's like, yes, this is what we're supposed to do. Like, forget about, you're going to lose your bonus if you don't go get it. So he's always pushing them to go get this alien and then bring it on board. And so it just... And I feel like the fact that was kept as a mystery, and there's like a betrayal, you know, there's two monsters on this ship. One of them is Ash, right? And it's the reason that you're here in the first place. It just, it leaves a much less up to coincidence, which I feel like horror movies in particular lean on too much. Yeah. Which it just makes for bad plot. You know, if you're just like, oh, it's just a coincidence that this guy, a coincidence, and then a coincidence that you bump into him or whatever. Like everything had a reason in this. So you shouldn't be using coincidence to move a plot ever, and this movie never did.
No, it definitely felt legitimate. I mean, even the reveal of Ripley just suddenly discovering, oh no, like there was something deeper going on, just typing on the mother computer. Right. And the reveal, I feel like, is done well. And then once like Ash is like,
and he's just in the room there too. That wasn't like jump scary, but it was like scary that she's like typing, and then like the camera just sort of pans and he had gotten in the room somehow. And he's like, there's a perfectly good reason for this.
Oh my gosh. I will say it did lead to one of the campiest scenes in the entire movie, and that's whenever Ash decides, like, okay, I have to take out Ripley, and after he has, like, knocked her out, drags her into the
sex room.
Yeah, the sex room where there's, like, a bunch of cutouts of women and what I believe to be deviled eggs at the very top.
Not deviled, they're like fried eggs.
Fried eggs, yeah.
Like fried eggs. They look like they're on something. I can't tell.
But it's so bizarre. But then he just takes one of the magazines, which I assume to be like a nudie mag, and proceeds to try to choke Ripley out.
Like shoving it down her throat, yeah. And it was almost like xenomorphic, really. He's trying to shove this tube down her throat, really. But yeah. And that's another just like, they're in this room full of nudie women, and like a man, he's a robot obviously, but a man robot is trying to shove something down Ripley's throat. You know, it's not one of those things that's like overtly sexual while you're watching it, but it's like there's a lot of sexual overtones here.
Yes, exactly. So I felt like that one scene dragged on a little bit too long with how campy it was. Like, I couldn't take it seriously. Like, they're just slapping, and then as soon as Parker comes in to lop off Ash's head, and he's just spraying white liquid everywhere.
I thought, and that was one of those things where I was like, oh, is he like infected by some alien thing or whatever? Because he was like sweating white the whole time, and I was like, what is going on? And then I was like, oh yeah, he's a robot. And that's just how robots work, I guess. But like, you don't really get that because it's not like he's full of circuits inside. He's full of like tubes and bubbles and things, and so it looks like worms are coming out of him when he cuts off his head. It's terrifying.
No, I will say it did lead to one of the not quite as believable practical effects, and that's whenever they're trying to hook him back up. They clearly have a dummy head that doesn't really look much anything like Ash, but they're trying to do it. But then once they actually like have Ash's real head, like through practical effects, making it look like he's sitting on a table, it does look believable.
Yeah, he did a really good job acting like he was like a robot that only had a little bit of power left. Just kept his facial movements really stiff, if ever, you know, and like the way he moved and talked, he looked like he was a robot. That actor did a great job.
Yeah, so because towards the beginning of the film, you see that he's like stiff, but there's a lot of people that are like that, just very uptight.
Right, and he's like the science officer, so it made sense for his character. He's just like, yes, this is analytical.
And he's just slowly stringing them along, because there's like a lot of points where Parker's even like, why don't we freeze him? Like, why don't we do this? And then he's just stringing them along like, oh no, you don't want to do that.
And it makes sense. But and it covers up some of those things that might otherwise be a plot hole in a movie. Because I was like, like, why don't you just freeze him? And then why don't you all just freeze once the little guy was loose in the ship or whatever? It's like, that's what you were about to do anyway, and it's not like he can get into the chamber, so it'll probably die after 10 months of y'all will be frozen. So just get in the chambers. But it was always Ash that's like, nope, we have to press on.
Yeah.
I need to get this back to the government.
Aside from that, what other spoilers do you think there are for us to kind of really dig into and discuss? I feel like we've gotten probably the most philosophical than any other episode.
We've gone a little deep. I just want to say that, like, this movie is great and it's widely recognized as so, and some of my favorite IPs have borrowed a lot from it. Like, I think of things like Metroid.
Yes.
I mean, obviously, like, Ridley's even the bad guy in Metroid, you know what I mean? Like, they very directly borrowed a lot. Half-Life even has a lot of borrowing from it. Like the face huggers and the
head crabs.
And the head crabs are all very similar, you know. And it's very it's just very bodily in nature, and I feel like its influences ripple, if you will. They ripple all the way through today and still influence things. So.
No, it's definitely, like, it deserves to be called a classic, both in science fiction and in horror. So even though we wouldn't say it's like just perfect 10 out of 10 film. Go ahead.
Just another fun thing. The very first words you see on Steam are like the name of the ship and everything, which is the Nostromo, I believe.
Yeah.
And that, I noticed, is also the title of a Joseph Conrad novel.
Really?
Yeah. And I haven't read it. The only Joseph Conrad novel I've ever read was Heart of Darkness, which this did kind of have Heart of Darkness vibes, if you've ever watched. Just like the a ship, right? Of course, in Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness, it's about a ship going into this African river and going to a tribe yet unknown and getting in danger while they're isolated in the middle of the jungle. This is, of course, a different kind of danger being isolated down. But I believe Nostromos was about, like, a mining expedition that got undermined by greed. So, yeah. Nostromo. The first thing I thought of was that, and then Nostromos also kind of sounds like, I doubt there's any connection here, but it just sounds like Nosferatu. As, like, sort of this undead presence. I don't know. But...
I feel like it just does so many good things. Like, it gives itself its own identity. It gives one hell of a story, and the atmosphere is like its own. And that's why I'm able to rewatch it. It's just to be immersed. And again, like I mentioned, that one scene where Ripley is trying to get off the ship as soon as she detonates a self-destruct. Like, that whole sequence is like my favorite part of the entire movie.
And what better way to give like an audible representation of like of tension, of having a deadline, you know, than the mother or like the ship counting down and being like, you have 5 minutes until self-destruct, you know, and you have to get out of there by that point.
Yeah, and it's just so nail-biting in the fact that whenever she tries going down, she's like, oh no, the xenomorph's there, I need more time.
Right.
And she's climbing back up, and she's not able to disable the self-destruct sequence. Like, she's at the point of no return, so then she's really stressed out because she's like, crap, I went up all the way here and now I only have 5 minutes to get into the pod and get out of here. So just super well written, super well directed, super well shot, just well done all around there. So it's definite strong 9 out of 10 for me still. Like, I could comfortably say that. There are some films that are 10 out of 10 for me, but again, it's just very selective, just like I'm selective about 1 out of 10s.
Right, yeah, and I'd say that's true for me too. We have yet to watch a movie in this podcast that I'd be like 10 out of 10. Well, this one gets really close. But it's not to say I don't have my 10 out of 10 movies in general.
For sure, yeah, and we'll definitely... I can't... Again, the amount of 10 out of 10 horror movies that I know of is like very small and few, because again, I'm very selective, but we'll definitely talk about one of them that is a solid 10 out of 10, and so I won't get spoilers into that.
Don't tell me which one. I wanted to influence you.
No, for sure. Definitely want you to kind of go in just not knowing how I feel about the film. But any closing thoughts you have before kind of wrapping up the episode?
I don't think so. Yeah.
No, I feel like this was a very good felt discussion overall about it, and I feel like, again, your prior experience watching it probably better even enhanced this situation of watching the film, and of course comparing it to the other horror films we've watched. I think it's it was a good choice and solid thing overall.
Obviously, I think very highly of it, and it's been an interesting experience now to watch it through a horror lens, which is a very deserving lens to watch it through. It's not something I remember it being like horror, but it's, it so obviously is.
Yeah, absolutely. So that wraps up this episode here, and so we're going to get ready to dive in with our next movie here, and so I'll throw the usual. You give me the hints. So we're going to be jumping almost 20 years from when it was made. And it's from a director we have already watched one of his films.
Interesting.
And the tagline, what's the tagline for Alien?
In space, no one can hear you scream?
Yep, and the title of the movie is in that catchphrase there.
We're watching Scream?
Yeah, we're watching Scream.
Okay.
Yep.
Cool.
So, tune in next time, guys, where we're going to be tearing right into Wes Craven's other acclaimed classic, 1996's Scream. Thank you guys so much for listening.
Yeah.
Alien.
I'm
sorry I stole that. It's so funny. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube, Castbox, or iTunes platforms to stay up to date when new episodes drop. To see what Aaron and I are up to, check out our respective Twitter accounts. For me, it is @ColeKirkVA, and for Aaron, it is @AnimalGameDev. Thank you all so much for listening to our podcast. We'll speak to you all again next time when we're poppin' the scary.